I really don't like BookTok at all.
We need to stop BookTok. We need to stop BookTok.
BookTok is absolutely ruining literature. Hi, my name is Glinta. Welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me, I am basically a wannabe booktuber or BookToker, and today I wanted to embark in my first ever video essay, which is going to be split into two parts. First part is BookTok is ruining literature, and the second part I'm going to dive into the dark romance genre and smut as a whole. So I might be looking down, and that's because I'm looking at my phone or my laptop, and there are going to be segments where I'm going to look different because this video is going to be really long and I'm not going to film everything in one day. In this video, I'm going to be talking about these, divided into different sections. But before we talk about whether BookTok is ruining literature, what is BookTok?
BookTok is a sub-community on the app TikTok that focuses on books and literature. On this sub-community, we usually see reviews, book memes related to books, and other tinier subsections like classic talks or dark romance.
The rise of BookTok began in 2021 when politicians had no clue what was going on. They could not handle COVID, everyone was forced to stay at home, restrictions were going on, and people had nothing better to do. So we were tired of doing dances that have been going around since 2019, so we had to find something else to do. And that was reading. A lot of people fell back in love with reading, and that created a new segment within TikTok called BookTok.
Prior to that, in 2020, bookstores and book owners were facing a big bad problem. Due to the fact that people literally had to stay home, bookstores went into a decline in profit as no one could buy books anymore. Even Waterstones was affected with an 8.4 decline, leaving me to question what big impact local bookstores had to face. Well, of course, your local bookstores were closing down, and that led to a decline. Some may even say over 80%. But there was a twist. People still managed to invest money on their hobbies online, all due to bookshop.org. You see, unlike Amazon, bookstore owners, indie bookstore owners specifically, can make profit from bookshop.org. Because of this online platform, bookstore owners were able to continue selling books regardless of the physical aspects of bookstores being closed down. Bookshop.org really helped, but BookTok made everything skyrocket. I mean, to me, it makes a lot of sense. People had to stay home, so they had to rely on hobbies that they had to pursue in their own house. That led to books being bought online and people sharing their own passions on social media.
So the rise of BookTube and BookTok led to obviously the rise of many other influencers. Some would be Ailey Pham, others would be Jack Edwards, which actually have been on BookTok or YouTube in general for a long time, but kind of shifted their audience towards a book space. These people tend to recommend different type of book genres, whether it be YA romance to fantasy, historical fantasy.
As you can see, BookTok provided a safe space for people, and with hobbies and sharing hobbies comes consuming into these hobbies, and this probably led to a possible overconsumption, depending on who you ask. So what is overconsumption? Overconsumption is basically the excessive use or consumption of something. In this case, it would be the excessive buying of books. You might have heard this phrase, BookTok is turning into fast fashion. And this is basically a critique of publishing companies and houses pushing book at a way too fast rate, leading to books being full of errors, misprints, and incorrect pages.
Okay, so I got this book today. I've been very excited and got home, cracked into it. It's beautiful. The spray wasn't messed up like I've seen for some people. And also, the misprint's not here. It does say Iron Flame. So I just cracked into reading it. I was super excited. And I make it all the way to page 34. And let me flip this camera angle. So I make it to page 34, and then it jumps to page 83. And so I'm searching through the book, and it picks back up again at 83 after making it to 130. This is seriously such a bummer, and I don't know what to do. I guess I pre-ordered it on Amazon, so I don't know if it's an Amazon issue that they can fix or what. Does anybody else have this? Did this happen to your books? Because I'm really bummed.
I mean, it's obvious that these are clear signs of fast fashion, right? But fast fashion would imply that it's easy to traditionally publish your book, and that's not the case.
Now, really quickly, I'm going to try and give you guys the querying context in the most rapid fire and clear way that I can. Essentially, to get a publishing deal and publish a book traditionally, you need to first get a literary agent. Queries are the little packages of novel that you send out to these agents. They're the submissions to the agents. Once you have a literary agent, they are going to be the person who's going to negotiate with a publisher on your behalf to get a publishing deal. They are the expert in their area. They have contacts in publishing. They know editors. They and the agency that they're at are going to be the people who handle film rights, foreign rights, translation, all of that kind of stuff. So you might be wanting to know why you wouldn't just submit to a publisher directly, and the main reason is that most publishers don't tend to accept submissions from authors. The best port of call is to try and get a literary agent, and literary agents are very, 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 very difficult to get. Now, I am not an expert, but based on the research I've done, generally, on average, agents are getting somewhere around 2,000 to 3,000 queries per year from aspiring authors, and on average they tend to sign maybe 1 to 2 clients. Now, I'm not amazing at maths, but those odds are really bad. And so the outcome of that is that A, agents are really busy and therefore take ages to get back to you, and B, a lot of really talented aspiring authors are taking years and years to get agents. This is something that tends to surprise people. What I've heard is that agents don't necessarily choose who they sign based on just the talent of the writer, but whether they personally love that book, if it appeals to their personal tastes, and if they feel that they can champion the author. Because in an ideal scenario, the agent is signing that author for their entire career. The process is this. Number one, you write a novel, you edit it and re-edit it and re-edit it, and you make sure that it's 100% finished and polished and ready to go. 2, you spend a lot of time researching reputable agents. You've got to be really careful and specific about who you send your book to. Number 3, you submit your query, which is generally a cover letter, a small sample of your book, normally around 3 chapters, and sometimes a synopsis. And then number 4, you wait. If the agent likes the book, they'll come back and request the full manuscript and read the whole book, and if they don't like the book, they'll reject you. Majority of agents will not respond to you at all, so that'll just be silence. I queried a novel back in 2020. This is my second time finishing a novel and then querying it, and without further ado, we're going to jump into the rest of the video. Here is my entire querying journey for Project T.
Essentially, what literary agents and publishing companies want is a book that can sell, because we live in a capitalistic society that relies on money, and any book that can sell is a good book. Another good way to gain profit is via special edition books. When it comes to money, capitalism relies on FOMO, the fear of missing out. In literature and the book industry, this would come across as extra chapters, an author's note, a signed edition, sprayed edges. Why would I miss out on that? So of course I'm gonna waste extra money on a book, overconsume, and eventually maybe go second hand and spend £200 on a book. This is no hate to anyone that buys special edition books, because that includes me. I think I've wasted around almost £200 on a special edition book once. So yes, for a company it is easy to sell, to gain profit, but for authors, black authors, it's not as easy, as they are not viewed as profitable. Because of that, it is much harder to get a literary agent within the black community. I've also noticed that this disparity is greater within the genre children's books. Only 6% of children's books are made by an author of color, and 2 of the largest UK publishing houses have only 2.7% of black staffs.
I became part of this movement of self-published black creators of books for children. Now, even though I've known about this problem with diversity and representation in books for as long as I can remember, it's since becoming a mother of 2 young children that I'm so regularly frustrated by the lack of diverse children's content when searching across multiple platforms, like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, and of course books on library and bookstore shelves. In fact, according to the Cooperative Children's Book Center, in 2017, just 11% of children's books published featured significant Black characters. And what's more troubling is that of that 11%, which was around 330 or so books, just 100 or so were created by Black authors and illustrators. So that means that of the already too small number of children's books published telling Black stories, the vast majority were told through the perspective of a white storyteller.
As a result, this disparity also affects a Black author's income. In comparison to their white counterparts, they earn way less. We're talking about hundreds of thousands, 200 of thousands. This was discovered via the hashtag Publishing Paid Me, where white authors were pressured to reveal their incomes and Black authors were able to compare this. As a result, most indie authors tend to be people of color as they need to gain money somehow. And then when we have people like Kate Corain who review bomb these indie authors, you can expect a very big controversy arriving.
Off without an actual apology.
Kate Crane, who one-star review bombed her debut peers, specifically BIPOC authors, has now just been dropped by her publisher, by Illumicrate, and by her literary agent.
Before we move on to the next topic, I would also love to mention how the romanticization of queer trauma is also used as a form of profit within the book industry, and how books relating to queer love aren't as published. That's why I was probably so happy when I heard that Red, White and Royal Blue was getting a movie adaptation. If you really want to hear me expand on the discrimination within literature when it comes to Black people, queer people, Palestinians, please give a follow as I'll make a continuation. We are now going to move on to my next point, which is reading is for smart people only, aka elitism. Whenever there's a discourse on TikTok, it's mainly two people arguing, the YA cutesy romance side and the classic literature side of TikTok. There is this rhetoric that BookTok is causing a mass influence on literature as a whole, causing bad writing, bad plot, tropification of books, and as a result, good literature, consuming literature, as this TikToker said, is vanishing. They are not totally wrong. Yes, BookTok has had a massive influence on literature. So much so that there's now a section on most bookstores dedicated to BookTok books. I think the main difference is that I do not see it as it being the end of the world. Sorry, I honestly just started laughing because I honestly do not see it as it being a bad thing at all. If anything, I see it as quite a good thing. I think it's also important to note why most people only view classics as meaningful literature, especially considering most classic authors look like this. Am I saying that a dead white man can't write meaningful literature? Absolutely not. I myself have cried and obsessed over classics written by dead white men. I do wonder why the popularization of YA is viewed as a downfall, a bastardization, or the end of the world. Is it possibly because reading is now amplified to a greater audience, so it's not this cool thing that only smart people do? Is it because YA arguably does not require deep intellectual thoughts, which isn't a bad thing, by the way. I absolutely love YA. And because it does not require these deep intellectual thoughts, people view it as less than, which is a classic elitist move in my opinion. I believe that when a certain audience criticizes YA books, they forget that they are not the target audience for that genre. Now, there is absolutely no issue with an adult reading YA books, but YA does mean new adults, and that equates to the age range to 13 to 19. So when I see a full-grown adult criticizing the writing as lackluster or poor, it makes me question whether it's because the writing is actually lackluster and poor, or is it because you're too grown to read that book?
I've seen a lot of comments like this about young adult books over the past year on Twitter and in other writing spaces, and I'm just like... Because it's always adults that I see commenting on young adult books and how they have poor writing or unrealistic, unrelatable characters or plot lines that just aren't interesting. And I do feel like this is consistent with the devaluing of children's literature that we've seen over the past few years, like with middle grade books, chapter books, picture books. Because young adult books are also children's books. They're children's literature. And I think that a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people seem to think that young adult is a genre and not an age category, but that's not true. Young adult is an age category. It's books written for children who are 13 to 18 years old. I literally saw a tweet from a parent saying that he wasn't allowing his child to read young adult books. Like, he was making the child age up straight from middle grade books to adult books, which is like, you're skipping an entire age category. The child is going to be a teenager being forced to read adult books. Like, that doesn't make sense when there are books specifically written for teenagers. And the reasoning that parent had for skipping over young adult as an entire age category is that he thought YA books are shit and not worth reading. And this is, again, adults encroaching on children's spaces. Like, as a teenager, I read a lot of young adult books and I loved them because they were written for me. I didn't think the writing was bad or that the characters were unrelatable, because those books are at an appropriate reading level for a teenager. Like,
I think most people forget that the reason BookTok popularizes the YA genre is because BookTok is a space mainly filled by teenagers. I think it's amazing that BookTok amplified the reading space for a lot of teenagers, and because of that we see younger people reading. People need to start reading somewhere, and that's probably via the YA genre. To assume that people jump straight into classics, which most don't even require a lot of intellectual skills or demand, is quite elitist. I think it's also important to note how writers such as Murakami are often praised regardless of their terrible portrayal of women.
Speak about women in a way that was quite objectified. We talk about them like they were just tits on legs, right?
Right, basically.
It was like, it's crazy. He's writing from the perspective of like this 19-year-old uni student who's been super sheltered. Maybe that is how that person sees them. We can't be like, that is wrong, because some people do think like that. And then as the reader, you're meant to be thinking, should we think like that? The answer is probably no.
Right.
Well, it is no. However, with Murakami, I then saw this interview where a female Japanese author, Miyako Kawakami, interviewed him, and she kind of called him out on this, and she kind of said, like, is it intentional? Are you trying to get into the headspace of these characters? And he was like, no.
It's also important to note that the act of buying special edition books was popularized way before BookTok, and classic readers were a big part of this. They still do, buy Penguin Classics, Clothbound Classics. Is this not overconsumption too? Every female-dominating space gets criticized. Makeup, jewelry, fashion, and BookTok. Although there are valid points of criticism within BookTok, as I've highlighted and will continue to highlight, there is a misogynistic tone that is portrayed in this discourse. For example, the term BookTok girlies, excluding the men that also participate in the bad aspects of BookTok, or making fun of women who made simple, harmless, and at most cringy videos, claiming that BookTok is bad because apparently they set out unrealistic expectations for romance. Yes, that was an actual tweet. There's also this new pick-me wave that's going on with BookTok. For example, this trend, you left your BookTok book at your house and then they show complicated classics or BookTok books that they claim are not BookTok books, but could class as BookTok books. Very confusing. But I do wonder if I'm the only one noticing this misogynistic tone. What do you guys think? Pop it down in the comments below. I've asked a few people on my BookTok account whether they think BookTok is ruining literature, and I've had different and very interesting responses. It's very interesting to see, as literature is worldwide, so it's really interesting to see the different responses. If you want to check out these responses, make sure to follow my TikTok. Well, what's my opinion that absolutely no one asked for? I think BookTok definitely has its issues, and I'm gonna dive into those issues in another video. But I also think that the criticism that BookTok receives isn't always valid. Sometimes it's because people just want to be different. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. This was my first video essay, so it definitely wasn't perfect. If you disagree, please politely comment why under the comments below. I love a good debate. Bye bye.